So, the other day I caught myself telling my dog to stop being fresh. Fresh? Who even says that anymore? My grandma maybe, but definitely not anyone I hang out with. It was a real aha moment, and not the good kind that Oprah's always talking about. It was more like, oh no, I've turned into my mother. Okay, let's talk about those phrases that just slip out. The ones that make us cringe and question our entire existence. You know what I'm talking about. Those little gems like, if your friends jumped off a bridge, would you jump too? Or money doesn't grow on trees. You swore you'd never ever utter those words, and yet, here we are. The worst part is, it's not just the words themselves, it's the delivery. You find yourself channeling your parents' tone, their facial expressions, maybe even their hand gestures. Suddenly, you're not just saying the words, you're embodying the whole parental experience. It's like being possessed by the ghost of nagging past. And the thing is, you can't even stop it from happening. It's like a reflex, a verbal tic that you're powerless to control. One minute you're a cool, hip, modern individual, and the next you're a walking, talking cliché of parental wisdom. But here's the silver lining, folks. Now, let's dive into something a little darker, shall we? Something that might make you chuckle and shiver at the same time. No, I'm not talking about our parents' questionable fashion choices in the E80s, although that's a whole other video. Those neon colors and big hairdos are a story for another day. I'm talking about those morbid little traditions that families have, the ones that make outsiders scratch their heads and slowly back away, wondering what kind of family they've stumbled upon. In my family, it's all about who gets what when someone kicks the bucket. Yes, you heard that right. We have a whole system in place. Now, before you call Child Protective Services, it's not as bad as it sounds. It's all in good fun, I promise. It all started as a joke between my siblings and me. We were just trying to pass the time and someone came up with this bizarre idea. We were sitting around one day, probably bored out of our minds, and someone brought up the idea of divvying up our parents' stuff. It was meant to be a light-hearted conversation. I call the antique china, one of us shouted, as if it was the most important thing in the world. No way, I'm getting the vintage record player, another one yelled back, not willing to back down. And so it began, this macabre tradition of jokingly claiming our inheritance. It became a part of our family lore. It became a running gag, something we'd bring up at family gatherings, much to our parents' amusement. Or maybe horror, it's hard to tell sometimes. They just shake their heads and laugh along. But here's the thing about these weird little family traditions. As much as they might make us cringe, they also connect us to our past. They remind us of who we are and where we come from, binding us together in the most unexpected ways. Remember when you were younger and you dreamed of having a huge house? You know, the kind with a sprawling lawn, a swimming pool, maybe even a bowling alley in the basement? Well, it turns out that as we get older, our priorities change. Who knew? Suddenly, those sprawling mansions start to feel less like dream homes and more like high-maintenance nightmares. All those rooms to clean, all that grass to mow, it's enough to make you want to move into a tiny house and live off the grid. Okay, maybe not that extreme, but you get the idea. I remember when I first realized I was turning into my parents in the downsizing department. All right, let's talk about FOMO, or as our parents might call it, fear of missing out on a good night's sleep. Remember when we were younger and staying out until the wee hours of the morning was a badge of honor? Those were the days when energy seemed limitless and the night was full of endless possibilities. Yeah, those days are long gone, my friends. Now we cherish our sleep like a precious commodity. Now, I'm not saying we've turned into pumpkins at midnight, although the resemblance might be uncanny after a certain hour. It's just that our definition of a good time has evolved. We've traded in the wild nights for something a bit more serene. Instead of dancing till dawn, we're more likely to be found curled up on the couch with a good book, a cup of herbal tea, savoring the quiet moments, and maybe our furry friends for company. And you know what? It's glorious. There's a certain peace in these simple pleasures. I remember a specific incident that made me realize I had fully embraced my inner parent when it comes to socializing. It was a turning point. A group of friends and I were planning a night out, and everyone was buzzing with excitement. The energy was contagious. "We'll go to that new club downtown," one friend suggested, their eyes sparkling with mischief. It sounded like a grand adventure. "And then we can grab some late-night pizza." Another chimed in. The plan was shaping up to be a night to remember. I tried to muster up some enthusiasm. I really did. But deep down, I knew my heart wasn't in it. But the thought of navigating crowds, dealing with loud music, and staying up past my bedtime — yes, I have a bedtime now, don't judge — filled me with a sense of dread. The idea of a late night felt more exhausting than exhilarating. So, I did what any self-respecting adult who's comfortable with their choices would do. I bowed out gracefully. It was a moment of clarity. "You guys have fun," I said. "I'm going to take a rain check." And with that, I embraced the comfort of my own space, knowing I made the right choice for me. Okay, this one might sound a little too real for some of you, but let's be honest, we've all been there. Remember when finding a parking spot was just a minor inconvenience? A small price to pay for a fun night out? Yeah, those days are gone, my friends. Now, if a destination doesn't have ample, well-lit parking, preferably within a short walking distance of the entrance, it's a hard pass. Parallel parking? Forget it. Valet? Too extravagant. We've become our parents, meticulously planning our outings around parking logistics. It's not that we're lazy, okay, maybe a little. It's just that we've learned to prioritize our time and energy. And honestly, circling the block for 30 minutes, desperately searching for a spot the size of a postage stamp, just doesn't sound appealing anymore. I remember when I first realized I had become my parents in the parking department. I was meeting some friends for brunch at this trendy new spot downtown. "It's going to be amazing," my friend gushed over the phone. Here's the thing about becoming our parents. It's not always a sudden, dramatic transformation. It's often a gradual, almost imperceptible shift. One day you're a free-spirited individual, railing against the establishment, and the next, you're the one telling kids to get off your lawn. It's like looking in the mirror every day. You don't really notice the changes, the subtle lines, the gray hairs, until one day, bam, you're staring at your parents' reflection. It's those moments, the ones where you catch yourself echoing your parents' opinions, their values, their quirks, that you realize the transformation is complete. And it's not always a bad thing. In fact, it can be quite comforting. I remember when I first realized that I had inherited more than just my mother's curly hair. I was having a conversation with a friend about work-life balance, a topic that used to make me roll my eyes. "You have to set boundaries," my friend was saying. "You can't let your job consume your life." And then it happened. The words left my mouth before I could even stop them. So, here we are, at the end of our journey of self-discovery, or should I say self-acceptance. We've laughed, we've cringed, we've maybe even shed a tear or two. Don't worry, I won't tell. But most importantly, we've learned to embrace the inevitable. We are becoming our parents. But here's the thing, it's not a bad thing. In fact, it's a beautiful, messy, hilarious, and ultimately heartwarming part of life. Because becoming our parents doesn't mean we lose ourselves. It simply means we're adding another layer to the tapestry of who we are. We're carrying on their legacy, their values, their love in our own unique way. We take what they have given us and we make it our own. We're becoming the keepers of their stories, the guardians of their memories. And in doing so, we're ensuring that their spirit lives on long after they're gone. So the next time you catch yourself saying something like, "Because I said so?" or "Money doesn't grow on trees," don't despair. Smile. Embrace the moment. You're not just repeating a phrase, you're sharing a piece of your history, your heritage, your heart. You're becoming a part of something bigger than yourself. You're becoming a link in the chain of generations, connecting the past to the present and shaping the future. And that, my friends, is something to be celebrated. So let's cherish these moments, these connections, and this journey. Well, that was fun, wasn't it? We've explored the hilarious, sometimes embarrassing, and often heartwarming reality of turning into our parents. And you know what I've learned? It's not something to fear. It's something to embrace. Because those little quirks, those familiar phrases, they're not just signs of aging, they're reminders of the love, the values, and the lessons that have been passed down to us. They're a part of our story, our family's story, and that's something pretty special. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you caught yourself turning into your parents? What are some of the funniest, most relatable ways you've noticed the transformation? Share your stories in the comments below.